So today is about building team resilience and particularly remote team resilience. And I had to, I guess, share a story. And it was from about November last year. And we, with Are You OK, were asked by the Navy to come and help launch an initiative for them. And they would, the 600 sailors you see there were about to go away for 3 months away. Just imagine that. It's been tough being isolated, at home for a while. Imagine being away from your loved ones for 3 months. And this was a very special event. What made it special was really two people. All those people you can see there, the 600 sailors, were preparing to go away for a long time from their loved ones. And it was made quite special by these two people. And it's Gwen Churn on the left and Commodore Stephen Hughes on the right. And so Gwen is an Are You OK ambassador, and she had tragically lost her husband, a serviceman, to suicide about 3 years before. And she shared with them, the signs she missed, the signs his mates missed in this tragedy, but also then just shared some really practical tips about staying connected with those around them. And it was, you could hear a pin drop as she spoke. Obviously, it was something very close to the hearts of the people there. And then came on board Commodore Stephen Hughes, and in Ron Burgundy speak from the movie, he's kind of a big deal in the Navy. As a Commodore, he oversees 19 ships and 4,700 personnel. And just an amazing guy in terms of what he said. And he just really nailed it for that moment, that organization. And I'm not saying this is the right thing for your organization, but for he just nailed this. And what he said was this. He said, well, we don't want to ever lose anyone from the Navy family. And he used that term. But he said, I want you to also think about that this isn't just a mental health issue. And I'd just be amazed if you haven't experienced it firsthand. This is also a capability issue. The Navy is nothing more than hundreds and thousands of great teams. And if one person's compromised, the whole team's compromised, the whole ship's compromised. But then he said that this is also a risk mitigation issue. And in our world, we'd much rather take out a threat or an enemy from 1,000 kilometres than from 10 kilometres or 1 kilometre. And said, so it is with mental health. So it is with mental health. And the earlier we can catch this, the better. And if you are away and you feel, I want you to support each other, but if you don't have someone to support, I'm going to give you my mobile number. And he actually read out his mobile number pretty quickly, which I thought was pretty impressive for someone who oversees 4,700 people. But that was the degree of, feeling and support, real authentic leadership. And then we went up to the top and had this amazing scene on the top, which you would have seen hopefully when you first registered for this webinar. And what this really shows, I guess, is real commitment. And it was quite a landmark event for me because, I thought back to 2009 when I first helped Gavin Larkin to launch Are You OK in Parliament House in Canberra. And some of you may know Gavin tragically passed away in 2011. But I just thought, here's the founder, how proud he would have been to see, this amazing display on the ship. And I really reflected that, we started from no employees, no money, essentially. And, we've been able to build this amazing movement. And as I reflected on it, it really probably is one of the most incredible teams I've been part of because, as I said at the start, we had very little resources, but we had this blinding belief in the purpose that a conversation could change a life. And that just led to the extraordinary growth and impact. And we're still a long way to go, but it was a nice point of reflection. And what I'd like to ask all of you to just reflect on is what's been a great team you've been part of? It could have been your year 9 netball team. It could have been your footy team. It could have been when you worked at McDonald's. It could have been this role. It could have been a previous role. But what team really stands out for you? And I'd like you just to write down, one or two or three words that encapsulate that. And if you wouldn't mind just typing into the chat box, what are some of those words? One or two words that you associate with your great team. We'll just take a moment to do that. And we've got Jenny on the line, and Jenny will read out some of these answers as they come in. So thanks for writing them and bringing them up. So any responses in there yet, Jenny?
Yes, so April has said connectedness.
Yeah.
Jim has said all for one. Rebecca said support. They're all coming in quite quickly. A lot of people are saying supportive. There for each other, trust, collaboration, more support, inclusive, family-like team, morale boosting, loyalty,
Fantastic.
humor.
Fantastic. And I hope it's almost time to conclude this webinar, because, you've just nominated, what's been the feature of really great teams. And there's a spirit of being connected. There's a spirit of supporting each other, having each other's back, great trust. And this has been reinforced by, a lot of research, but just, I find it really interesting that we can just nominate so quickly what it is about the great teams. And as we think about going forward, as we think about this COVID-19 crisis, we do really need to think about, how can we help recreate that? And even if it's just for ourselves, for our home teams or our work teams, but if we have wider influence across an organization, how exactly can we do that? How can we scale that up? So thank you for that contribution. And hopefully you'll see how this is reinforced through our whole message today. We've got, as you can see, there's a Q&A area there. So if any questions come up as we move along, please just type them in, and there'll be regular places about every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so where we'll stop for questions, and also a poll. We want to make this as valuable as possible. And also, if there's any comments you have about, what I say, if you agree or don't agree, please just put them in the chat box as well. So a little bit about me, for those of you that don't know me, and how I came to be involved in Are You OK? I was in a senior leadership position with a management consulting firm called A.T. Kearney when there was a big crash. And you can see I've got a few grey hairs that I've actually been through, I think 4 crashes now in terms of stock market and big disruptions. The first was 1987, when there was I think about a 28% drop in the share market in one day. The tech crash in 2000, the GFC in 2007, and now this COVID-19 massive disruption. And my 90-year-old father says that this is by far the biggest that he's ever experienced in terms of change. He just can't believe that the pubs are closed. He said even the war, the pubs were open. So, and of course, it's much, much more profound than that. But, it is really big times. And when I came out of my my really bad depression, when I was out of work for 5 years, I wrote a series of books, and as I mentioned, got involved in helping to start Are You OK? I've also started a new business called Factor C, which is about scaling more caring and mentally healthy workplaces, and I'll talk a little about that at the end. And this work, and funnily enough, a previous word cloud in March 15, which I think was one of my first webinars, Jenny organised a word cloud, and it showed that the 3 biggest stresses for people in this COVID-19 crisis were uncertainty, isolation, and fear of unemployment. And that led to a session I had on the ABC breakfast. I'm just trying to move my screen. What's happening here? There we go. So what we're going to be covering today, I'm talking about a care crew, and a care crew is where there is care, there is resilience, but also a shared future. And we're going to be discussing today's reality, having a Q&A, talking about the resilient leader mindset, because ultimately it is leaders and resilient leaders that lead resilient teams. We're also going to be talking about actions that leaders take that really help to, build this resilient team. Having another Q&A and talking about red zone care when people are, depressed or anxious and what we can do about that, and also a Q&A as well. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So this is the one that I mentioned that we did with one of my first webinars on March the 15th. It seems like a lifetime away, but you can see that, uncertainty, isolation, and unemployment were big fears. Now, what's really interesting is that, and thank you for everyone for filling out that on registration, what are you most concerned about in transitioning back to the office? And I think this is incredibly interesting that still there is a lot of fear about returning back. You can see the biggest ones are health and safety, spread of the virus, coping with change, and social distancing. So there's big messages in this for anyone that is overseeing transitions back to normal work, whatever that looks like. And I think what this signals is that we need to take account of how different people are feeling and have different scenarios and different options in place for different employees. Because when we went through each of the responses, and we had, I think, 116 people here today, each of those responses, there was everything from, really being very fearful of public transport to things like, why go back to the office? And I, fear nothing sort of thing. So, it's like we're all different. And, as team leaders, team influencers, organizational influencers, we need to take account of all those elements when we think ahead. Now, I just want you to think about this. First, those initial fears about or stress, and then this now. And I read recently early this year, this book called The Culture Code, and I'd really thoroughly recommend it. And it looks at some really high performance teams in today's market. Groups like Pixar, groups like Google, the elite Navy SEALs teams, and a bunch of others. And one of the things that I really loved is that, there's some great stories and anecdotes, but then it just really distills something. And what it says is if we want teams that are well equipped for the future ready teams, leaders and also the other team members need to be asking themselves these three questions. Do we feel connected? Do we feel safe? And that's psychological safety as well as physical safety. We'll be talking a lot more about that. And then do we have a shared future? And, this shared future, I think, is just really critical in bringing people along, keeping people engaged, getting people motivated and inspired about, your workplaces and what you do. And I want to think about this in all the themes, this connection, safety, and shared future in all the things we talk about, because we're going to be moving on to the leader's mindset and the leader's actions. And as you'll see, I will try and link it back to this connection, safety, and shared future. So as a leader, and we are all leaders, whether we are, a little team or working for ourselves, if we care for the people around us, we are leaders. And so when we want to create the right environment, we need to practice self-care. Now, this isn't about self-care, but for those of you that may be familiar with my message, I really say that self-care isn't selfish, that we need to fill up our own tank so that we can take care of other people. It's a really, really critical component. The next element is crew care. And so this is about, creating the right team environment, but the team environment that you described right at the start when you revealed the factors around your best team. And I want to talk about some practices that can help create this, even in this very volatile and uncertain world. And then the third part is red zone care. And this is looking after those who might not be great. And if you kept an eye on the news, you'd see that, stress levels are much higher, traffic to Beyond Blue, to their helpline is 40% higher. To websites is much higher. So there is a really escalated stress level, not surprisingly because of this extensive change. Now, if we get self-care and crew care right, we get growth. If we get crew care, red zone care right, we get resilience. And if we get self-care and red zone care right, we reduce risk. So this is a huge aspiration, I would hope, for every organization, that we can reduce risk, we can increase resilience, and we can promote growth if we promote a culture of care. And that's what I really hope to prosecute the case for that today. And I know a number of you on this course, and I know a number of you, really believe in this as well. And I think this is fascinating. Talking about a culture of care, well, culture actually comes from the Latin word of cultus, which means to care. So when we throw around this word culture, it should be about promoting a spirit of care in your organization. And the interesting thing is that probably one of the strongest organizational predictors of performance is a Gallup question. That, the Gallup organization has been measuring engagement or discretionary effort for over 50 years. And they've got it down to just one statement, which is most predictive. And that is, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. And they've shown that the more people that agree with that or strongly agree with that, the higher the profit, productivity, customer service levels, and employee longevity. This isn't nice to have. This is just business critical, especially in these times. And my invitation is that, you all, and I know many of you do this already, but just think, how can I promote it in my team and beyond? Because the more we can do this, the better we all are equipped to coming out of this crisis, well equipped for the challenges ahead. And just to reinforce how important it is to fill our own tank, this is the Australian Psychological Association of the US, and you can see the massive benefits when a leader supports a wellbeing program or care, care environment. And the best way to do that is to walk the talk. It doesn't matter so much what leaders say, as we all know, it's what they actually do. So, but there are big paybacks. And one of my, I guess, wishes and beliefs is that this crisis will reconnect us to the importance of people for the future of business. And it's a message that I think is just so important now. And even, the recent Deloitte study about the future of work, they said the future of work is human, because they divided work into three categories: hand, which is physical work; head, which is work that accountants and lawyers and actuaries do; and heart. And heart is where there's collaboration. And all the future of work is around collaboration. All the demand growing is collaboration. That's all about teams working better together. So, this is business critical going forward. I want to talk about a few tools. In my last webinar, some of you attended that, was about self-care and talking about our own moodometer and being in the green zone. When we are in the green zone, we are 31% more productive, 37% more influential, and 300% more creative. Like, again, no brainers for business to try and promote this. And the red zone, when people are anxious, and I speak with firsthand experience, we're not, or depressed, we're just not very productive. And so the more we can do to keep ourselves there. And Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky from the University of California tells us that there's three things that influence our mood. Number one is our genetics. That contributes 50%. And we can't do much about that. Number two is our intentional actions, what we choose to do each day. And we can do something about that. And number three is events. And that's only 10%. So, and I also believe that this same sort of moodometer applies to teams as well. Dave Logan in the book Tribal Leadership talks about 5 levels of teams. And it reflects that that moodometer. And so a leader being in the green zone is the best predictor of a team being in the green zone. I think another good tool to think about for both individual and team wellbeing performance is the Yerke-Dodson stress performance curve. This is a very old curve and study. It goes back to 1908. But these two gentlemen put this curve together and showed that stress is actually good for us. It increases our performance until it gets to the top, and then it declines. And as you can see at the top, on one side of the bell is focused and the other is fatigued. It's a very, very fine balance. So how do we keep ourselves in the focus zone? How do we keep our team in the focus zone? These are all really important considerations going forward. So just stop now to see if there's any Q&A or comments or anything from Jenny. If not, we'll sort of move on through, but I just want to make this as interactive and as helpful as possible. Anything, Jenny?
Yes, Graham, we do have a question around self-care, and they're asking, sometimes when we're caring for others, it really can impact our own mood and have a negative impact on us. So how can we get around that and make sure that we do practice self-care while looking after others?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And, there's such a thing as care fatigue, particularly in, the healthcare and community care type industry. And it's very, very real. And I love it's a bit short of time to tell this story, but there's this Buddhist story about a mystic monk who shares with an emperor about, the key to a more caring and resilient kingdom. And his basic tenet was you care for the one you're with. And so when you're caring for someone else, that is your primary concern, doing things that will help for them. But we spend a lot of time by ourselves and, thinking about what are things we can nurture our self-care. And so it is about topping up our, what I call vitality, our physical health, intimacy, our emotional health and prosperity, our contribution health. But there's little things, even, taking micro breaks can make a real difference there. But, the spirit of today, it might be time to do another one on self-care. Might do that one next, Jenny. Any other comments at this stage, Jenny?
That's it for the moment.
Great. So right at the crew care, this is what we're here to hear about. We've heard a little bit about, the whole context of it. And I want to just reflect on this, how do we build a team environment? How does a leader build a team environment where we feel connected, safe, and have a shared future? And I think this is quite interesting. Now, this was before the COVID-19 meltdown and the isolation. But even before then, as you can see, this was in May 2019, 23%, almost 1 in 4 Australian employees felt there was nothing done to connect them with their colleagues, not coffees together, not celebrations, not having a beer or a wine after work, not having a team picnic, nothing. So, and this was before COVID-19. So I would suspect this score is much higher now. So we're not starting from a great base. Now, also part of this same process, we measured 7 questions about team psychological safety, and it revealed this. One of the really important things about team psychological safety is you feel safe to take a risk at work. This is an emotional risk, not a physical risk. So, trying new things to help a customer or an employee. And as you can see, Are You OK has measured it twice, and it's got worse from 2017 to 2019. So now only 28% say it's safe to take a risk at work. Now, this is just crazy because we need to be able to take little risks because things are changing so quickly. We need to be able to do that, but there is still a lot of fear, and leaders can play a role in this. And I'll talk a bit more about what they can specifically do. The next thing I think is also quite disturbing is that, great teams where people can be themselves. If you reflect back to, some of the comments you made at the start, you felt connected with your teammates. I'm sure you'd say you felt you could be yourself as well. And when people can't be themselves, you just don't get the best. And as you can see, it's only about 50% say that they feel they can be themselves. So, again, that's something that all of us should be working on. And that's about, it's about feeling connected. It's also about feeling safe. It's also about having included in a shared future. So these are really quite concerning. Right, we're now going to do a quick poll about what do you think managers are finding most challenging about the remote working? And I'm just going to launch this poll and just ask you to pick what you think is the biggest concern of managers. So that poll's in front of you now, and just out of those 6, just choose one, the one that you think is having the biggest impact right now. So some people answering there, thank you. We'll keep it open for about another, yeah, it's great. It's really wonderful watching this all. I'm going to put my glasses on to be able to read the results. Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm sure you'll be very interested to see the results here. Yeah. We'll just give it another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I'll end the poll and share results. So as you can see there, you know, but not, and I guess not surprisingly, it's hard to know what's really people are really experiencing at home. 47% have that frustration as a manager or feel that they do. And it's by far, you know, the biggest standout. The next one, biggest one is the lack of camaraderie that comes around being around each other. And then, you know, too many Zoom or Skype calls. So, and you can see that result okay, Jenny? You can see those results okay? You there, Jenny?
Yes, sorry, my mic wouldn't come back on. We can see those. Yes, thanks, Graham.
Great, excellent, thanks. Great, we'll take this away. And even though we're talking about these 3 stages of returning to normal in Australia, and you know, we've got some people here from the US and Canada, and especially the US, it's very, very different there. But you know, it's not going to change overnight. And as you can see by the word cloud at the start, that there's still a lot of people that are very concerned about what's going on and what's happening. And I love this slide. I saw it from a fellow speaker called David Dugan, and I think this is a great mindset. We're going through a real transition time. A lot of people are thinking, well, let's just stay the same. And we think if we stay the same, we'll drift and we'll float. But that's actually a real fallacy. In fact, if we do just keep doing what we've always done, we will sink. But if we decide, if we make decisions to make little decisions each day, we will move forward, we will swim. And I'm 100% convinced. I had a client a couple of days ago told me he read this book about, you know, future planning. And he said a really important component is having robust optimism. And I really love that term. And to have robust optimism, you know, we have to keep ourselves in the green zone because we can't be optimistic if we're not in the green zone. But, you know, just to know that we can work this out. If we work together, we can work this out. And then this is something that I came across when I was studying a lot about resilience. And it comes from the Harvard Business Review did a special book edition on resilience. And they published, I think, 15 articles of their most, you know, shared and watched articles. And from all those articles, they determined 4 laws of resilience. And these include, number 1, accept current reality. And, you know, so it's no good trying to change what's happening. If we don't like it, we just have to, you know, accept where we are. If we're having trouble with finances, to work out what our finances are, how long we can last, how we could access more money, accept current reality. Number 2 is be resourceful, brainstorm solutions, you know, jot down ideas on how to address that specific problem. Bounce it around with trusted friends, trusted colleagues, and see what you can come up with. Then the 3rd element is to decide on the best action for the day. You know, you may not have complete information, but you're often better off to act, to have a bias to action than doing nothing. And then the final element is to act, you know, to take action. And often doing that, taking that, you know, that step forward, even if it's a little step, can make a big difference. So we talked about resilient leader mindset. Now I want to talk about resilient leader actions. And this is to create a, a care crew. And there's two elements of this. There's one-on-one, and I think there's some interesting things that need to be considered now for one-on-ones. And they include this, is asking people, are you okay? As you can see by that word cloud right at the start, a lot of people are still really struggling. And so asking that is really important for your weekly meeting. Next in a weekly meeting, ask them, are others okay in your team? Because they might be talking to people that are more honest with them than they would be with you as a leader. So asking if others are okay, so you get a bit of a feel for how the rest of the team's going in an informal way. Ask about what's your number one goal for this week. And I'll be talking soon about, daily team meetings that can be really helpful in this environment. But having a number one goal for the week, I think is really essential for people to have a sense of purpose, a sense of connection. Asking if there's any impediments for that number one goal, trying to really expose and to help them have that spirit of service and help for those you're having the one-on-one conversations to. And finally, how can I help? What can I do, to help take things out of your way? Now I want to talk about virtual crew weekly meetings. So these are, daily meetings. And I'm borrowing this, one of my green zone strategies is to, before the physical distancing happening, I used to meet two mates, Alistair and Bernie. That's Bernie on the left, Alistair on the right. Now, Bernie runs an interesting tech startup business looking at cryptocurrency arbitrage platform. Like, I can't even begin to understand what it's about. But for 15 months, Bernie has run a virtual team of 15 people across the Philippines and Australia. And if you don't know, Philippines have been in much more severe lockdown than Australia. But Bernie's had this going for a while. And so he's had this in place. But he said it's become even more important, much more important since the COVID-19 crisis. And he asks, he literally has it down to 10-minute stand-up meetings every day. And, you think about those three things I talked about before, about connection, safety, and shared future. Just look how this addresses this. So number one is, are you okay? Is your family okay? And he really says they don't move forward until they do something like that. The other interesting tweak he added to it is, what's one thing you're grateful for about yesterday? It could have been went for a nice walk with a dog. It's just a simple thing, but just gets people a bit focused on something positive. Second thing is, what did you get done yesterday? And I'm going to build on each of these and just show the evidence behind each of these as well. What's your number one goal for today? And are there any impediments? So this is literally a 10-minute, he does it at 8:30 every day. And because they've been doing it, they got it quite, underway, and there's a sense of connection, a sense of safety. So just going back to this, so on the care one, so asking, are you okay? And I just want to reflect on the role that leaders can make in making it safe to ask, are you okay? And I started by talking about Commodore Stephen Hughes from the Navy and what he said. This was another event last year. It was in Canberra. And on the right is Catherine Newton, who's Are You OK's CEO. On the left is Matt Flavell. And Matt is the Deputy Secretary in the Treasury Department, the Federal Treasury Department. So he reports to the Secretary, or essentially reports to the CEO. So he's a very senior person. And he chose to launch Are You OK in Canberra on the lawn outside. And he spoke just very passionately about the importance of asking, are you okay? And he talked about when he'd asked and when it made a difference. But what made it really transformative is that he then said, some of you may know that I've been through some difficult personal times myself in the last year. And I've really appreciated some of you asking me, are you okay? And you know who you are. He then said, some of you even noticed I was losing weight and were buying me, a sandwich at lunchtime and just leaving it on my desk, and just want to let you know how deeply appreciative I am of that and how it made a real difference. So when a leader admits vulnerability like that, it just provides unbelievable permission for people to talk about what's really going on. You can either talk about what's really going on or not talk about it and pretend it's not going on. We're much better off to know what's going on. So having this spirit of care, this "are you okay" mindset is essential. The second element, what did you get done yesterday? If you're familiar with Therese Umberleigh's book, The Progress Principle, she's a psychologist at Harvard Business School. She's done this research where she asked people, over 1,000 people, to keep a diary on each day. They wrote about one event, either a positive event or a negative event, and then deconstructed it. You know, what was it about that made it a positive or negative event? And from that, she was able to determine that the most motivating thing for information workers, and let's face it, we are all information workers, was knowing they're making progress on meaningful work. And the big thing was, it wasn't about employee of the month or massive progress, it was little wins. And this stand-up allows everyone to have a virtual high five. The next one was, what is your number one goal for today? And again, it just provides everyone with a sense of focus for today. We talked about having a weekly number one goal, but a daily number one goal. And, you know, this book, Your One Thing, really demonstrates how people that are able to focus, if, you know, before they start their day, they write everything down and then they write their number one thing and then they work out when and where they're going to do it. And if you can get your whole team to do that, you will see an extraordinary lift in productivity. And the third element was, you know, are there any impediments? Now, this is being honest. This is being about psychologically safe. And I'm going to build up and talk about this psychological safety, because team psychological safety is essential. And, you know, a team that is psychologically safe, you've already been in, because you described it when you talked about your greatest team, or a really fantastic you've been in before. And probably one of the greatest thought leaders globally on this is Professor Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School. And I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with her twice to do the measure of the psychological safety of the Australian workplace in 2017 and 2019 for Are You OK? And Google have built very much on her work as well. And you may be familiar with this research, which was called Project Aristotle by Google. They sought to find out what was the key to their most successful teams. And, you know, they end up, at first they thought it was going to be individual elements. They end up finding out that it was actually not individual elements, but how those teams work together. And they identified these 5 areas: psychological safety, I'll come back to that, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. But by far the most important was psychological safety, because what that means is that people could be honest with each other, they could take safe risks, they could be in the learning zone. When you're in a psychologically safe environment, you can be in the learning zone. And this is absolutely critical to great team and great organizational performance. Groups like IDEO, groups like Google, groups like Pixar have these psychologically safe environments. And just by way of an example, you know, when it's all said and done, and without wanting to be political about this, you know, you have to say that the Australian leadership of both on the federal level and also the states has managed this crisis very well. I would say, almost say that it's been a psychologically safe team environment, and they've listened to experts and taken action with experts. And unfortunately, if we go to the USA, I would say it's exactly the opposite, where experts haven't been listened to, and they find themselves in a much more vulnerable position because they, you know, didn't have a psychologically safe environment where people could have robust discussions about what was right, get consensus and move forward. This is Amy Edmondson's definition of psychological safety. You know, you can see there, interpersonal trust, mutual respect, people comfortable being themselves. And this is I call this the Care Crew Credo, and I put it together really after doing multiple sessions like the one we started with our webinar today, where I asked people to reflect on a great team they've been in and what was unique about it. And then I, deconstructed it and looked at the research. And what you're seeing there is for a team that does value self-care, crew care, and red zone care. And I'm 100% convinced that this is the future of organizational success, teams that can do this. Just some of the things that are, really relevant, I think. Just some of these things I'm highlighting here. But if you have any interest, you can download that for free from my website, grahamcowan.com.au. Now I want to talk about red zone care. We'll move quickly through this, and we will finish in time. We're supposed to finish at 1:50, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to stay on as long as people have questions. Yesterday we had a webinar for a tech company, and we were 20 minutes after the finish time, so very happy to do that today as well. So any questions on anything we've covered, please type them in, and Jenny will keep track of those as we move through it. This was incredibly inspirational to me in managing or thinking about how we manage mental health in the workplace. And it's by Vikram Patel, TED Talk. I really urge you to look at. Long story short, he was a Indian psychiatrist trained in the UK, came back to India, no resources, no funding in India. And he came across this book called Where There Is No Doctor. And it provided real inspiration to him about simple ways to look at mental health in places where there was no expertise. And he ended up writing a book called Where There Is No Psychiatrist. And then from that, he developed really simple approaches that illiterate villagers could use, trusted and respected village elders could use to help someone that had a mental illness in a village. And he has got the most remarkable results, equivalent to first world results where there's no problems with medication or hospitalization. But it just showed to me the power of having trusted and cared for people around you who have simple things in place. And so when I did my third book, I decided to survey over 4,000 people to find out what helped them most in their recovery. And this is what came up. And it forms the acronym I CARE. And so the I is how you identify people who are struggling. C is for compassion and asking, are you okay? A is for access experts. R is for revitalizing work, knowing that work is good for our recovery. And E is for exercise. And then this was developed into a poster. And if you'd like a copy of that poster, you can download it from my website there as well. But then I thought, how can we scale this? How can we take this from, what I do in little one-on-one sessions to massively scale it across an organization? So I'm now going to put on a 2-minute video. You won't see sound, but it doesn't matter because you'll see the words. So that gives you, I guess, an overview and you know, can start off as e-learning, which can be customized to any organization with your values, with your EAP resources that everyone can have on their phone essentially. But it can also be put into a blended learning solution. And just to give a quick example, we had Volkswagen wanted us to do a version for their dealership employee or dealership people, which is about 4,000 around Australia. So we did a customized version that each of them, all the 4,000 people, could access easily on their phone. They then asked to put together a train the trainer or train the manager, because in the case of Volkswagen, they bring people to two academies, one in Sydney, one in Melbourne, where they train all their people in those two locations. And so they have VW trainers. So we put together a facilitator's guide, which in essence showed the facilitators, the trainers, or even the managers on how to present this material, and then put together, you know, PowerPoint slides, videos, scenarios, booklets, posters, and wallet cards. And so the idea is that you have the e-learning, the face-to-face where it's about scenarios, and then it's then on the job application of what you learn. And I think it really is this sort of action which helps promote a more mentally healthy environment. And you can also purchase, Brendan Carter, my co-founder, and I now have this available online, so you can just purchase a single license from that website, wecare365.com.au. And if you're interested in any of these remote solutions for your organizations, this is actually an information pack which can be downloaded from my website. So it's got information about the learning, got information about the various webinars I have available. As I said, there's a self-care, crew care, red zone care, and also some specifically for leaders as well. And, coming back to our whole culture of care, what we do about promoting this culture of care. And, to have this culture of care, I really believe that each of us needs to really embrace the concept of what we can do. If, as I said, I will stay back, while there's any questions or comments and what have you. But if you need to go away, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, ask a question. Can't guarantee I'll get back to you straight away, but I will get back to you, I guarantee it. I really want to help as much as I can. But, for each of us to embrace that each day, I'm really convinced we need to be caring, be helpful, and go for the growth zone. Right, Jenny, any questions or comments now?
We do have some more questions, Graham. Now, the first one you did speak to a little bit, but it's a really important point, so I'm going to read that out. It says, as leaders, we sometimes have days where we have low motivation. How do we continue to encourage others to be motivated when we aren't ourselves? And is it okay to share our own feelings with the team when we feel low?
Yeah, I think it is okay to share, as long as we're also committed to doing something about it. And, some of the best leaders I've worked for have been incredibly authentic and just say, I'm really stuffed at the moment. I'm really out of steam. I need to rejuvenate. One of my, probably, I guess, the most inspiring boss I ever had was a guy called Jack O'Mahony. And he went on to become the CEO of Cochlear in Australia and also the CEO of this division of Pfizer. So very successful. And he always had a really, really balanced life, even though he was very successful. He coached an under-16 rugby team. He went sailing most Friday afternoon. And so, practicing self-care is good for us and it flows on to those around us. And we can't help people, we can't inspire people if our own fuel runs out. So it's fine to be vulnerable. It's fine to share frustrations and depletions, as long as you're also committed to taking action and doing the right things to get yourself back in good shape again.
Okay, we have another question here. It says, I work in a highly competitive team, everyone trying to outdo each other, probably based on their own insecurities. Any tips for developing psychological safety in a competitive team environment?
Well, I once worked with a very, very competitive environment. I worked for a number of years in the recruitment business, and every week in the recruitment business, you knew what you billed by the end of the week. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It's very, very difficult if the right systems and structures aren't in place. And it depends whether you're a leader or whether you're just part of, you're a team member. But as a leader, I think there are really ways that we can. And one of the, what Google shared, they did this research to find out what was the best and fastest way to improve team psychological safety. And the foundation was people getting to know each other better. And so, strong trust and respect, people being authentic. But the thing they found moved the needle the most on team psychological safety is each week, every person then shared a risk they'd taken in the previous week. So in the recruitment sense, it could have been, you could have a difficult relationship with a client, and so you took a risk to reach out and say, look, I'm just not happy with how things are going. I realize I played a role in this. What can I do differently? So you taking a risk, and leaders doing that, making that happen is really, really important. So that's the way to make it happen the fastest. But ideally, and I think even many of these hyper competitive areas now are including team-based incentives for this reason. Part of the biggest problem in the Banks Royal Commission was some of these individual incentives which promoted these unhealthy behaviours. So hopefully, and again, this COVID-19, I hope this crisis is a bit of a wake-up call as well. But as a team leader or someone who's just sharing a risk you've taken, and also striving to get to know each other, people, and being authentic.
Graham, we've had a request for you to share again those three main concerns that people had about transitioning back to work.
Yeah, well, the three big things were health and safety, fear of the virus spreading again, and social distancing in an office situation. They were the three biggest concerns. And it was interesting, Jenny helped me put that together, and just going through it one by one, there was such a variety of responses, but there was this large core. And as you can see, the three biggest words that came up reflects that. There's still this large core of people that have real concerns, and employers and team managers really need to take this into account. I spoke with a manager of a recruitment business yesterday, and he said that and this is before I'd even told him these results, he just sensed it in talking with these people. And he said that he's going to leave it up to individuals and how they decide to do it. If someone doesn't want to come back, for a few weeks or whatever, he's going to leave it entirely up to them. They have that level of trust and respect now. And he's also changing how he views the office. He sees the office now not so much as a workplace, but as a collaboration space. And so, how he sees it evolving is that, for 2 days a week, everyone might be in, but for the other ones, people can drift in and out depending on, what's involved. So, but they're the big three still, that, health and safety risk, the fear of the virus, and social distancing in the workplace. So what happens when you get into a lift? Does that mean you just get 4 people in a lift, one in each corner? They're the sort of things that need to be thought through.
Another question here. How do we best support team members who do struggle with mental health issues? Often these are mainly triggered by the environment outside of work, and it trickles into the work environment.
Very, very hard, isn't it, to separate our work life and our private life, because it flows over so much. I just think building up, and I've been on the side of it where I'm the one struggling, and I just really appreciated when people were honest, when they were authentic, when they also just shared that we need to work on this together. And the person who's struggling also needs to take ownership on not just finding, but also seeking out solutions as well. And so it is being caring, but it's also being challenging as well. So if you have someone who's been struggling for a while, but they haven't seen a GP or spoken to a psychologist, they have an obligation to sort of step up as well, particularly if they've already tried you know, the lifestyle strategies like more exercise, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my suggestion. It has to be caring but challenging. And because I really believe that the key to growth, the key to recovery from mental illness is challenge, getting a little bit outside your comfort zone, a little bit outside on a regular basis. That really helps us develop as people and as individuals.
Final question. Where did the 4 levels of resilience that you spoke about come from?
It was a special edition of the Harvard Business Review book. It's like one of these, let me find an example. Harvard Business Review bring out special editions about that thick, and it was one specifically on the most discussed and cited articles on resilience in the entire magazine. So it's a little booklet. So you can probably find it on Booktopia or Amazon. And if you can't, please just reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'll tell you the exact title details.
That's it for questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for joining. And, may you have a really lovely weekend and practice some good self-care strategies. All the best.